The great chamber was silent. 12 species sat in their places of power, looking down at the small human woman who stood alone on the speaking platform. She was nothing special to look at. Short black hair, simple gray uniform. No weapons, no guards. Just Ambassador Chen Wei, representative of Earth, standing before the rulers of the galaxy. The Concord of 12 had controlled this part of the universe for 600,000 years. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had seen young species crawl out of their home worlds, reach for the stars, and then fade into history. To them, humanity was just another brief spark in the endless darkness. For 300 years, humans had accepted this truth. They signed unfair treaties. They took the worst planets. They bowed their heads when aliens insulted them. Earth's leaders smiled through every humiliation, every reminder that they were newcomers in a very old galaxy. But everything had changed. 6 months ago, the breath came from the empty space between galaxies. No one knew where they started. No one knew how old they were. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were a swarm, a hunger, a force that moved through the universe and consumed everything in its path. The Concord had faced many enemies before. They had always won. Their fleets were massive. Their technology was advanced. Their warriors were brave. Against the breath, none of it mattered. In 18 months, the breath destroyed 4 of the founding species of the Concord. Ancient civilizations that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years were simply erased. Their worlds burned. Their people died. Their histories ended. The great fleets of the Concord fought back, but they were losing, badly. Every battle cost them more than they could afford. Every victory was really just a slower defeat. Now the Concord was desperate. They needed soldiers. They needed resources. They needed bodies to throw at the enemy. And so they had called every species under their control to this chamber to demand their contribution. When they called humanity, they did not ask nicely. High Commander Vrexis of the Telori spoke first. He was a tall creature covered in blue scales, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like dying stars. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "The human delegation will now hear our terms," he announced. "Earth will provide 60% of its population for the war effort. These biological resources will be used as the Concord sees fit. Failure to comply will result in the immediate destruction of all human colonies, followed by the sterilization of Earth itself." Ambassador Chen Wei did not react. She simply stood there, her hands folded in front of her, her face calm. "You have 1 hour to accept," Rexus continued. "There will be no negotiation." The chamber waited. The other species watched with a mix of pity and relief. They were glad it was not their people being demanded. They felt sorry for the humans, but not sorry enough to speak up. Chen Wei looked around the room slowly. She looked at each of the 12 ruling species. She saw their fear. She saw their arrogance. She saw how they still looked down on humanity, even as their own civilizations crumbled. Then she smiled. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was not the careful, polite expression that human ambassadors had worn for 3 centuries. This was something different. Something older. Something that made several of the watching aliens feel suddenly uncomfortable. "I have a counteroffer," Chen Wei said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the massive chamber. Rexus made a sound of disbelief. "You do not make offers, human. You accept our terms or you die." "No," Chen Wei replied. "I do not think so." She touched a small device on her wrist. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered and changed. New images appeared. Star maps, fleet positions, numbers that made no sense. "For 300 years, my people have played a role," Chen Wei continued. "We acted weak. We accepted your insults. We let you believe we were just another young species waiting to be controlled or destroyed." She stepped forward, and her smile grew wider. "We were waiting, but not for your permission to act. We were waiting for the right moment to stop pretending." The resonant Primus, oldest of all the Concord members, leaned forward. It was a being made of living crystal, ancient beyond measure. Its voice was like music and breaking glass combined. "What game is this, human? You have no fleets, no armies. Your technology is primitive compared to ours." Chun Wei laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of real amusement. "Our technology is primitive," she agreed. "The technology we showed you, anyway. The ships we let you see. The weapons we allowed you to scan." She shook her head. "We have hidden our true nature since the day we first detected your signals. We knew what we were, and we knew you could never understand." She looked directly at the Primus. "You think you are old. 600,000 years. Very impressive." Her voice dropped low. "But tell me, Primus, what do you know of what existed before your kind crawled out of the mud? What do you know of the first breath?" Silence. Complete and total silence. Chun Wei turned back to address the full assembly. "The Vreth are not your enemy to fight. They never were. This is a family matter, and it has been waiting 65 million years to be settled." She clasped her hands behind her back. "I suggest you stay out of our way." She turned and walked toward the exit, leaving chaos behind her. The game had changed. The masks were coming off, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity really was. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in tunnels that no satellite had ever detected, Director Samuel Okonkwo walked toward humanity's greatest secret. He was an old man now, 73 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. His father had prepared before him, and his father before that. The chain went back further than anyone could count. The elevator dropped for nearly an hour, down through rock that was billions of years old, down past the places where normal humans lived and worked, down to where the truth was kept. Samuel was the 1247th Director of the Inheritance. That was what they called themselves now. But they had used many names throughout history. The Watchers, the Keepers, the Silent Covenant. Every human civilization, no matter how primitive, had its secret guardians. People who knew what humanity really was and where they really came from. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. Samuel stepped out into a corridor carved from solid diamond. Yes, diamond. Miles and miles of it. Created by beings so advanced that they could reshape matter with a thought. This place had existed long before humans built their first fire. Long before dinosaurs walked the earth. Long before almost anything. Samuel walked slowly. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Blue lights glowed along the walls, ancient technology that had never failed and never would. The air was cool and clean, recycled by systems that had operated perfectly for 65 million years. He passed rooms filled with wonders. Weapons that could crack planets. Engines that could bend space and time. Medical technology that could cure any disease and extend life for thousands of years. All of it waiting. All of it ready. All of it left behind by those who came before. The first breath. That was what they called themselves. The first humans. Samuel had learned the truth when he was just 20 years old. His father had brought him down here and showed him everything. At first, he had not believed it. How could he? The story was impossible, but the proof was everywhere. 60-5 million years ago, a human civilization had reached the stars. Not this human civilization, an older one. They had evolved on Earth during the age of dinosaurs in a warm period that lasted millions of years. They had built cities and ships and wonders that modern humans could barely understand. And then the breath had come. The first breath had fought them. They had battled across galaxies, sacrificing everything to stop the swarm. In the end, they had won. But the cost was too high. Their civilization was destroyed. Their people were nearly extinct. They knew the breath would return eventually. The swarm could not be killed completely. It would regenerate over millions of years and come back hungrier than before dawn, so the first breath made a plan. They would seed Earth with their genetic material. They would hide and wait and let evolution do its work. Eventually, new humans would rise. And when the breath returned, those new humans would need weapons. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was not an accident. It was a signal, a marker, a way to clear the planet and start fresh. The first breath had arranged everything. Samuel reached the command center. It was a chamber 5 kilometers wide, carved into the bones of the planet. Holographic displays filled the air, showing Earth, the solar system, and the galaxy beyond. Thousands of workers sat at stations, monitoring systems that had slept for millions of years. Everyone looked up when Samuel entered. They knew what was coming. They had trained their whole lives for this. "Report," Samuel said. General Maya Torres stepped forward. She was young for her position, only 40, but she was brilliant and brave. Her family had served the inheritance for 11 generations. "All systems are ready, Director. The fleets are waking up. Estimated time to full activation is 6 hours. Samuel nodded. "Show me." The displays changed. Samuel saw the moon first. Earth's moon. Humanity's closest neighbor. Most people thought it was just a rock that had been circling Earth for billions of years. They were wrong. The moon was a ship. The largest warship ever built. It had been placed in orbit around Earth millions of years ago, disguised as a natural satellite. Inside it waited weapons that could shatter stars. Then Mars, the red planet. Everyone thought the red color came from iron in the soil. That was true. But the iron was just paint, a shell. Beneath the rusty surface was a shipyard that stretched across the entire planet. Thousands of warships waited in the darkness, ready to fly. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune. Every planet in the solar system held secrets. The great red spot on Jupiter was not a storm. It was a door. Behind it waited a battle station the size of a small moon. And beyond all of that, in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system, the Oort cloud stretched for trillions of miles. Scientists thought it was just ice and rocks. It was not. It was the main fleet. Millions of ships. Weapons beyond counting. War factories that could build new vessels in hours. All of it sleeping. All of it waiting. All of it ready. Samuel felt tears on his cheeks. He had known about all of this his whole life. But seeing it wake up was different. This was real. This was happening. "The breath have returned," he said quietly, just as the first breath predicted. "And now we finish what our ancestors started." He straightened his shoulders and wiped his eyes. "Wake them all. Every ship. Every weapon. Everything." His voice grew strong. "Today, humanity stops hiding." Across the solar system, ancient machines began to stir. Lights flickered on in places that had been dark for 65 million years. Engines that had never fired began to warm. Weapons that had never been used began to charge. The inheritance was waking up, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Concord Assembly was in chaos. Ambassador Chen Wei had left the chamber, but her words remained. They hung in the air like poison. They infected every mind. They changed everything. High. Commander Vrexis slammed his 4 fists against his console. "She is bluffing." The humans have nothing. They are lying to save themselves. But even as he spoke, his voice trembled. He did not fully believe his own words. The resonant Primus raised one crystalline limb for silence. The chamber slowly grew quiet. All eyes turned to the ancient being. "Bring her back," the Primus ordered. "We will hear more." Guards were sent. Minutes passed. Then Ambassador Chen Wei walked back into the chamber. She looked relaxed, almost amused. She showed no fear at all. "You wanted to speak more?" she asked. The Primus leaned forward. "You spoke of the first breath. Explain." Chen Wei nodded. "Very well. I suppose you deserve to understand what is about to happen." She touched her wrist device again. The displays around the chamber changed once more. 65 million years ago, by your counting, a human civilization existed on Earth. They called themselves the First Breath, because they were the first intelligent life to evolve there. They rose during the age of great reptiles, what we now call dinosaurs. Over millions of years, they built a civilization that spread across the galaxy. Images appeared on the displays. Ancient ships, massive space stations, cities that floated among the stars. Technology that made the Concorde's achievements look like children's toys. They were peaceful at first, Chen Wei continued. They explored. They studied. They created. They thought the universe was a place of wonders waiting to be discovered. Her voice grew darker. Then they found the Vreth. The display showed a swarm of darkness moving between galaxies. Billions of creatures that moved as one. A hunger that could never be satisfied. The Vreth had already consumed 3 galaxies before the First Breath encountered them. They tried diplomacy first. They tried to understand the swarm, to communicate with it. But the Vreth do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They only consume. Chen Wei walked slowly across the speaking platform. The war lasted 10,000 years. The First Breath fought with everything they had. They sacrificed trillions of lives. They burned worlds to stop the advance. They created weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. She stopped and faced the assembly directly. In the end, they won. But the cost was too high. Their civilization was destroyed. Their population was reduced to almost nothing. They knew they could not rebuild in time. Admiral Threx of the Corvani Collective spoke up. He was a being of living metal, cold and calculating. If they won, why are the Vreth here now? Because the Vreth cannot truly die, Chen Wei answered. They had been reduced to almost nothing, scattered across the void between galaxies. But given enough time, they would regenerate. They would rebuild their numbers. They would return. She smiled sadly. The First Breath calculated that it would take approximately 65 million years. They did not have enough time or resources to prepare a defense. So they made another choice. New images appeared. Genetic codes. Evolution charts. A small blue planet. They seeded Earth with their genetic material. They encoded their DNA into the life of the planet, ensuring that humans would evolve again. Then they hid. Chen Wei gestured at the displays. They built weapons and ships and hiding places throughout the solar system. They created machines that would maintain everything for millions of years. They wrote messages and left instructions for the new humans who would eventually rise. The asteroid, the Primus said slowly, the one that killed the dinosaurs, was deliberate, Chen Wei confirmed. It cleared the way. It reset the planet. It allowed evolution to take a new path, one that would lead back to humanity. Rexus shook his head. This is impossible. We have scanned your solar system. We have studied your species. We found nothing. You found what we allowed you to find, Chen Wei replied. The First Breath knew that new humans would need time to grow, time to learn, Time to understand their inheritance. They also knew that young species attract predators, so they designed everything to be hidden until the right moment. She clasped her hands behind her back. For 300 years, we have studied your technology while hiding our own. We have watched your wars and your politics. We have let you believe we were weak because revealing our strength would have caused problems we did not need. The only enemy that matters is the breath. Everything else is distraction. The chamber was completely silent. Every alien species stared at the small human woman, trying to understand what she was saying, trying to believe it. Finally, Admiral Threx spoke again. If this is true, then your hidden fleets. They are 65 million years old? Yes, and they are advanced enough to defeat the Vreth? Chen Wei's smile returned, but now it was sharp and cold. The first breath spent their final years building weapons specifically designed to destroy the Vreth. They studied the swarm for thousands of years. They knew every weakness, every pattern, every possible evolution. The fleets they left us are not just powerful. They are perfect. She looked around the chamber one more time. The Concord of 12 has ruled this region of space for 600,000 years. You have accomplished much. You should be proud. But you are children playing with toys compared to what came before. She started walking toward the exit again. We are activating our inheritance now. The Vreth will be destroyed within days. You can help if you wish, or you can stay out of the way, but do not threaten humanity again. She paused at the door and looked back. We have been very patient. We will not be insulted anymore. Then she was gone, and the Concord was left to face a truth they could barely understand. Humanity was not what they thought. Humanity had never been what they thought. And now the universe would see what 65 million years of preparation looked like. The Vreth Hive Admiral observed the human solar system from 17 light years away. Its consciousness was spread across 1 billion bodies, all thinking as one. It had consumed entire galaxies. It had ended civilizations beyond counting. It knew no fear, but something was wrong. The readings from the human system were changing. Energy signatures were appearing where none had existed before. Massive energy signatures. Impossible energy signatures. The Hive Admiral focused more attention on the distant system. It watched through 1,000 sensors scattered across space. What it saw made no sense. Earth's moon was breaking apart. No, that was not right. The moon was not breaking. It was opening. The gray surface cracked along lines that had been invisible before. Great sections of rock fell away into space, revealing what had been hidden beneath for 65 million years. Metal, weapons, engines, lights. The moon was not a moon. It had never been a moon. It was a ship, a warship. The largest warship ever built by any species in the history of the universe. The Hive Admiral felt something it had not felt in a very long time. Uncertainty. On the bridge of the newly awakened vessel, Director Samuel Okonkwo stood in silence. Around him, thousands of crew members worked at stations that had been waiting for this moment since before the dinosaurs died. The ship's name glowed on every display. Remembrance of First Light. All systems online, General Torres reported. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wide with wonder. Weapons charged. Engines ready. We are fully operational. Samuel nodded slowly. He was watching the displays that showed what was happening across the solar system. Everywhere he looked, ancient machines were waking up. Mars was shedding its skin. The red dust that had covered the planet for millions of years was falling away in great clouds. Beneath it, the true surface appeared. Metal and glass and technology beyond modern understanding. The entire planet was a shipyard. Thousands of vessels rose from hidden hangars. their hulls gleaming with lights that had not shone since before humanity's second evolution. The asteroid belt was coming alive. Rocks that had drifted silently for ages were opening up, releasing swarms of smaller craft. Attack ships, defense drones, mining vessels that could strip a planet to its core in hours. The first breath had hidden an entire industrial civilization among those floating stones. Jupiter's great red spot began to spin faster. The storm that had raged for centuries was actually a gateway, a door held shut by ancient technology. Now it opened, and from within came the Jovian Reserve. These were ships built to survive the crushing gravity of gas giants. They used weapons that fired compressed matter from the hearts of stars. At their center floated the Wrath of Forgotten Dawns, a battle station that made the Remembrance look small. Saturn's rings shimmered and shifted. They were not ice and rock. They were billions of dormant machines, each one a weapon or a tool or a factory. They began to move, organizing themselves into formations that spread across millions of miles. Neptune and Uranus revealed hidden bases. Pluto turned out to be the command center for the outer system defenses. Even the sun itself had surprises, ancient satellites hidden in its corona, absorbing energy for 65 million years, now ready to release it all at once. But the true terror came from the edge of the solar system. The Oort cloud had always been a mystery. Scientists thought it was just ice and debris, the leftover material from the solar system's formation. They were very, very wrong. The Oort cloud was the main fleet. Trillions of objects began to move. Trillions. Each one was a ship or a weapon or an automated war factory. They had drifted in the cold darkness for millions of years, waiting for this exact moment. Now, they formed up into attack groups that stretched across light years of space. The Hive Admiral watched all of this with growing horror. It searched its ancient memories, its collected knowledge from 3 consumed galaxies. It found what it was looking for, and it felt something very close to fear. The first breath. The old enemy. The ones who had nearly destroyed the Vreth so long ago. But they were dead. The Hive Admiral knew they were dead. The war had ended them. It understood now. They had not truly ended. They had just changed form. They had become something new. And they had been waiting. Director Okonkwo watched the Vreth fleet on his displays. Millions of swarm ships clustered together, a mass of hunger and destruction that had terrorized the galaxy. They seemed so powerful, so unstoppable, but they were not. "Signal all fleets," Samuel said. His voice was calm and clear. "This is Director Okonkwo, speaking with the authority of the inheritance. Our ancestors died fighting these creatures. They spent their final years building everything we see around us, knowing they would never live to see it used. They left us their hope and their fury and their unfinished war." He paused, looking at the displays that showed the awakened armadas. "Today, we honor their sacrifice. Today, we finish what they started. All units, engage the Vreth. Show them what 65 million years of preparation looks like." Across the solar system and beyond, the ancient fleets began to move. Engines that had been built before the Concord species were born roared to life. Weapons designed specifically to kill Vreth charged to full power. Ships that had waited longer than most civilizations existed finally had their purpose. The Vreth Hive Admiral tried to retreat. It sent commands to scatter, to flee, to hide in the darkness between stars. But wherever its ships tried to go, the human fleets were already there. The First Breath had studied the Vreth for 10,000 years. They knew every pattern, every strategy, every possible response. There was no escape. The remembrance of First Light fired its main weapon for the first time. A beam of pure destruction, powered by technologies that modern science could not explain. cut through space and erased 10,000 Vreth ships in a single moment. Across the battlefield, similar weapons fired from similar ships. The Vreth screamed through the void, their hive mind crying out in pain and confusion. They tried to adapt. They tried to evolve. They tried every trick that had worked against lesser enemies. Nothing worked. Director Okonkwo watched the battle unfold. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but he did not wipe them away. "For the first breath," he whispered. "For those who gave everything so we can have this moment." The galaxy had never seen destruction on this scale. The galaxy had never seen power like this, and it was only the beginning. The war lasted 9 days. 9 days to destroy an enemy that had consumed 3 galaxies. 9 days to end a threat that had terrorized the universe for longer than most stars had existed. 9 days to finish a conflict that began 65 million years ago, when the last Vreth hive node burned in the darkness between stars. The galaxy fell silent. Every species that had been watching, every civilization that had held its breath, every being that had feared the swarm now stared at their displays in disbelief. The humans had won, completely, absolutely, without mercy. Ambassador Chen Wei stood once again before the Concord Assembly. But everything was different now. The aliens no longer looked down at her with contempt. They looked at her with something close to awe. And fear. Definitely fear. Behind her, holographic displays showed the aftermath. Vreth wreckage spread across hundreds of light years. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable was gone, erased. Nothing remained except cooling debris and the silence of the void. "It is done," Chen Wei said simply. "The Vreth will not return. The weapons we used do not merely kill. They prevent regeneration. They end the cycle permanently." The resonant Primus spoke, and its voice was humbled. "How?" "The Vreth adapted to everything we threw at them. They evolved faster than we could develop new weapons. The first breath spent 10,000 years studying them," Chen Wei replied. "They mapped every possible evolution, every potential adaptation. They designed our weapons to counter not just what the Vreth were, but everything they could ever become." She paused, letting that sink in. "You are never going to win this war. Not because you are weak, but because you did not have enough time. The first breath had millions of years to prepare. You had centuries. The outcome was decided before the Vreth even arrived." High Commander Vrexus rose from his seat. His forearms hung at his sides, and his glowing eyes were dim. The arrogance that had filled him just days ago was completely gone. "Why?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "Why did you hide? Why did you let us insult you for 3 centuries? With power like this, you could have ruled the galaxy from the beginning." Chen Wei was quiet for a long moment. She seemed to be considering her words carefully. "Because power without wisdom is dangerous," she finally said. "The first breath could have conquered everything. They had the technology. They had the weapons. They could have made themselves gods." She shook her head slowly. "Instead, they chose to be guardians. They chose to protect the universe rather than control it. They died defending a galaxy that did not know they existed, leaving everything they had for descendants they would never meet." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species represented there. "We inherited their power. We also inherited their values. When we first discovered what was hidden in our solar system, we had a choice to make. We could have revealed ourselves and demanded respect. We could have taken control of the Concord and ruled as the first breath never did." A small smile crossed her face. "We chose patience instead. We chose to wait for the enemy that mattered. We chose to be protectors rather than conquerors. The insults and the humiliation were unpleasant, but they were not important. The Vreth were important. Nothing else." Admiral Threx, the being of living metal, leaned forward. And now? Now that the Vreth are destroyed and your power is revealed, what will humanity do? This was the question everyone wanted answered. The question that would determine the future of the galaxy. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could destroy anything. The Concord species were completely at their mercy. Chanwei's smile grew warmer. Now we would like to be good neighbors. We have been waiting a very long time for the chance. The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. After everything they had seen, after the display of overwhelming power, the humans were not demanding anything. They were not taking revenge for centuries of insults. They were just offering friendship. You do not want anything? The Primus asked carefully. No territory? No tribute? No recognition of your superiority? We want peace, Chunwei said. We want to share what we can of our ancestors' knowledge. Not the weapons, but the science, the medicine, the history. We want to help build a galaxy that is prepared for whatever threats may come in the future. She clasped her hands in front of her. The First Breath believed that the universe is full of dangers. The Vreth were just one threat among many. They believed that the only way to survive was for all intelligent species to work together. We believe the same thing. Days later, Director Samuel Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Remembrance of First Light. The great ship was returning to its position in Earth's orbit, ready to disguise itself as a moon once again. General Torres stood beside him. The Concord has agreed to the treaty. They are accepting humanity as an equal member. Some of them are still afraid of us, but they are cooperating. Samuel nodded. Good. Fear will fade with time. What matters is that we are working together now. He looked out at the stars through the massive windows of the bridge. Somewhere out there, other threats were waiting. Other enemies. Other challenges that would require the combined strength of all intelligent life. The First Breath gave us everything, he said quietly. Their technology, their weapons, their warnings about what waits in the darkness. But the greatest gift they gave us was their example. He turned to face Stories. They could have been tyrants. They chose to be guardians. They could have conquered. They chose to protect. That is the true inheritance. Not the ships or the guns, but the understanding that power must serve something greater than itself. Torres nodded slowly. What happens now? Samuel smiled. It was a tired smile, but a hopeful one. Now we help rebuild what the Vreth destroyed. We share what knowledge we can. We prepare for the next threat, whatever it might be. And we remember. He looked out at the stars once more. We remember those who came before. We remember what they sacrificed. And we make sure it was not wasted. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity was not what anyone had thought. They were ancient and powerful and strange. But they were also kind. They were choosing to help rather than dominate. The Concord of 12 became the Concord of 13. And in the deep places of the solar system, the ancient Armadas returned to their rest. The weapons powered down. The ships went silent. The war machines that had ended the greatest threat in galactic history settled back into their hiding places. They were not decommissioned. They were merely sleeping waiting just in case, because the universe was vast and full of dangers. And humanity would be ready for whatever came next. This was the promise of the First Breath, passed down across 65 million years. This was the inheritance of humanity, and they would honor it forever.